Okay, so continuing on for this is for Module 5, covering chapters 7 and 8. We're going to talk about political participation and then a little bit about the media. So, political participation is defined as an activity with the intent of influencing government action. There are three key factors to keep in mind when we're thinking about what influences our political participation. So, mobilization is how well citizens can either respond to a call for action or get out there and take political action on their own around a political issue. Some organizations are good at mobilizing their constituents, getting people to come out, either write letters or come to a protest or make phone calls, go to a march, that kind of thing. And so the level of mobilization is really important in terms of being an influence over political participation. Personal resources, that's the amount of time, money, and civic skills that an individual has access to. So if you're wondering, if you're thinking about what makes a person likely, more or less likely to participate, if they have a good amount of time, if they have enough money, if they have the civic skills, which includes communication skills, the ability to talk to people, to communicate their ideas, also familiarity with the political process. Those are important skills to have because they make a person feel more confident and more able to get out there and participate in the political system. So those are personal resources that kind of influence whether a person will participate in the political sphere or not. The third is community involvement. So if an individual has a lot of close community ties, then they are more likely to participate with the political system. If they have fewer ties with their community, then they're really not as likely to come out and participate. So more and stronger ties increase the likelihood of participating. And that kind of goes back to what we said, thinking about the agents of political socialization, how families and religious institutions can often be, if they are politically active, then the individuals who are associated with them are usually more politically active too. That's an important part of community involvement. So now, thinking about these forms of political participation, I put some of these statistics here just for your information so you'd have an idea of what percentage of the population engages in these forms. There are some additional forms here at the bottom that we don't have any statistics on, but all of these are part of a huge list of what it means to participate politically. And there are some things that probably are not on this list, but this is just meant to give you an idea of the possibilities. And I encourage you to use this list when you are thinking about what you might do for your form of political participation for your teams. And we'll talk about that a bit in class today. We will also have an activity where you learn about some specific forms of participation and you get a chance to educate all of us about them. And that's going to do it for chapter 7. And then when we turn to chapter 8, our focus is the news media. So the first thing to understand is this idea of the media landscape, and that's kind of what the media situation is in this country overall. Polarization is a term that you've probably heard mentioned a lot because that is used to characterize kind of what's going on in our country right now. Polarization is a process where a person's stance on a given issue or policy, it's more likely to be strictly defined by their identification with a particular political party. So I talked about the political spectrum a little earlier. When polarization occurs, individuals are more likely to be kind of holding tightly to their political ideology, and whatever their particular party says, then that's what they're going to go with. Selective viewing. So when we think about the media, if we have polarization, then selective viewing is more likely to occur. Selective viewing is when individuals are seeking out media sources that only reinforce their points of view. So if you're feeling polarized and you want to hold tightly to your point of view, then it makes sense that you're only going to look for media sources that say what you want them to say. Now, thinking more about the big picture, it's important to think about media ownership and consolidation. So even though we are consumers of media, if we think about the other side in terms of who is owning the media and what's going on there, media ownership and consolidation is this process whereby fewer individuals or organizations are controlling more and more of the mass media. So media cross ownership is when a single individual or a corporation owns multiple media businesses. So that's part of that consolidation, when fewer and fewer individuals or organizations own more and more of the media. In broadcasting table, I mean, some of the types of media businesses that this happens to has been broadcast, cable television, film, radio, newspaper, etc., etc. So there's a document that I'm going to show you in class, and it's also been uploaded to Canvas. It's a top 5 media corporations document, and it also has a link to a cool infographic, which just gives you more information so you can really see which corporations are owning the media at this particular time. But the impact of cross media or media cross ownership on news coverage. Think about the fact that fewer and fewer individuals or one corporation can own several media outlets. It makes sense then that you're going to see the same story across all the outlets that this one corporation owns. So you see identical stories appearing in several newspapers around the country, not much diversity, and not much diversity on the perspective on the story either. So you'll see the same handful of national stories that are told, often from the same perspective and maybe even in the same words. And then you see that the news, it changes from just kind of being fact-based to being covered from an entertainment perspective, because the idea is that these corporations have to gain and keep an audience because they are trying to make money. So that's kind of some of the impact of this media cross ownership, this concept here. Now, traditional media sources, that includes newspapers, radio, network TV, and those are actually declining in importance. There are lots of traditional media sources still out there, but they are, and we can talk a little bit about why you think they might be declining in importance, but they are. And part of the reason they're declining is just because of the advent of these new media sources that have sprung up. So new media is all media related to the internet and the interplay between technology, images, and sound. So these are increasing in importance, and that includes, social media. It includes blogging, other kinds of media that you don't necessarily get from network television. Twitter, of course, that's become an important news source, and those are increasing in importance. So something to think about, and we'll talk about in class as well. So we will then talk a little bit about critical media literacy in class, but just to define the term, it's the application of critical thinking skills in order to assess, analyze, evaluate, and create messages in a variety of forms. That's what critical media literacy is. So when we talk about traditional media or new media, it's important that we're literate so that we can use our critical thinking skills when we're watching, so that we're not just being consumers. We're analyzing, we can evaluate, and then also we can create our own media in a variety of forms. So we will have an activity where we will watch a political interview together, and we will answer these questions. And that will conclude the class and our focus on Chapter 8. Also, don't forget that you will have your second debate in class this evening on Chapter 8, Political Punditry. So be prepared for that, and then you will have time to check in with your team. Some of the questions that you're going to be answering tonight with your team, you're going to talk about the status of your particular sections, what types of political participation you want to engage in, and you'll talk a bit about your team's creative visual aid. So that concludes the lecture video, and I will see you all in class. Have a great evening.